The sound of paint sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty roadside. It was a peaceful day in the outskirts of Santa Clarita, California. Birds chirped, wind rustled through dry bushes, and dogs barked lazily behind old wooden fences. But that calm would be broken by something unexpected and cruel. A biker named Vin roared down the cracked road on his Harley. He wasn't alone. 3 other bikers trailed behind him, laughing, smoking, and throwing beer cans out of their saddlebags. Vin was their leader, loud, aggressive, always looking for attention. But what he did next was different. It wasn't just a prank, it was heartless. He spotted a small dog wandering near the road, thin, tail wagging, clearly lost. Without slowing down, Vin jerked his bike to the side and kicked his heavy boot out toward the dog. The yelp echoed like thunder. The little dog flew through the air, hit a mailbox post, and collapsed in a patch of dry grass. It didn't move. The other bikers burst into laughter, like it was some twisted game. Bullseye. One of them shouted. Vin turned back with a smirk. Should have brought a helmet, mutt. None of them noticed the old man across the street, sitting silently on a wooden bench, his hands folded over a cane, his eyes fixed on the scene. His name was George. He was quiet, slow-moving, always polite. But behind his aged face was a man who knew pain, a man who had once trained soldiers and dogs. George stood up, his joints creaking like rusty hinges. He walked over to the injured dog, bent down, and gently picked it up in his arms. His fingers shook, but his grip was firm. The dog's breathing was faint. George didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't threaten. He just whispered, "No one hurts one of mine." 20 minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside George's ranch-style house. 2 figures stepped out, tall, calm, both wearing jeans and plain shirts. The first was a man whose presence turned heads no matter where he went, Keanu Reeves. The second was just as recognizable, larger than life, his frame like a mountain the rock. They didn't come for fame. They came for loyalty. "How bad?" Keanu asked as he approached the porch. George stepped aside, letting them in. "He's alive, but shaken. He's one of the pups from our last rescue run." The Rock knelt by the dog, his massive hand gently stroking its fur. "What happened?" "Biker thought it'd be funny," George said quietly. "Kicked him like a football." Keanu's eyes narrowed, not with rage, but with sadness. He had seen too much of this. People who hurt the helpless. People who thought pain was entertainment. "Do you know who?" The Rock asked. "I know the sound of his laugh," George replied, "and the name stitched on his jacket." Keanu looked at him. "What do you want us to do?" "Nothing rash," George said. "Just let them meet the ones they mocked." Keanu smiled faintly, understood. That night, the biker bar was loud. Metal music blasted from the speakers. The same 4 bikers sat around a table, downing shots and retelling their story. Like war heroes, they laughed harder every time, Vin described. The dog's yelp. "Man, did you see it fly?" Vin shouted over the music. "Bet I could try for a German Shepherd next time." His friends howled with laughter. But then the music cut off. Everyone turned toward the door. 2 men stood there, not dressed like bikers, not holding weapons, just standing quietly. Keanu Reeves, The Rock. For a second, no one moved. The bar fell. Silent. Vin chuckled and leaned back. "Well, look who it is. John Wick and the big man himself. You boys lost." Keanu didn't blink. He just walked forward slowly, stopping a few feet from their table. "I heard you hurt a dog," he said softly. "So," Vin spat, "you gonna cry about it?" The Rock stepped forward and placed a photo on the table. It was of the injured dog, eyes closed, wrapped in a soft blanket, one paw bandaged. "He's ours," The Rock said. Vin stood up. "Listen, you to Hollywood clowns think you can come in here," and he didn't get to finish. Keanu stepped closer, not touching him, but close enough to make Vin flinch. "We didn't come to fight," Keanu said calmly. "We came to teach." The bar owner, a middle-aged woman named Darla, stepped between them. "Gentlemen, I don't want trouble in here." "There won't be," Keanu said, stepping back. He looked at Vin one last time. "You made a joke. Now you'll be part of one." The next morning, Vin and his crew woke up to find their bikes gone, completely vanished from the bar's lot. They searched the entire area, but there wasn't a single tire mark, no security footage, no leads. What they didn't know was that the bikes hadn't been stolen. They had been relocated. Miles away, in a wide field just behind George's property, for customized Harleys sat in the open, chained together, guarded by 12 massive rescue dogs. And in the center of the field stood Keanu and the Rock. They were training the dogs and waiting. As word spread across town, something strange happened. People who once ignored the rescue dogs started asking questions. Kids brought food. Families came to volunteer. And slowly, the ranch filled with people who wanted to help. Meanwhile, Vin and his crew searched every corner of the county. But it wasn't about the bikes anymore. It was about their pride. And the truth that was about to break them. Because someone had taken a photo of the bar incident, and it had gone viral. Millions saw it. Keanu standing still, the Rock holding the injured dog. The caption read, "This is what strength looks like." Vin's joke wasn't funny anymore, and things were just getting started. The world starts watching. The wind that blew across George's property wasn't just warm. It carried change. Dozens of volunteers were now arriving every day. They came with food, blankets, cleaning supplies, and most importantly, love. The rescue ranch had always struggled for help. But now, after the viral photo of Keanu and the Rock holding the injured dog, the world had turned its attention. Reporters parked outside the fence. Cameras flashed. Microphones waved through the air. But George refused all interviews. "This ain't about us," he said quietly. "It's about them." He pointed toward the dogs, some blind, some limping, some just learning to trust again. And at the heart of it all was one dog, the small one Vin had kicked. They named him Chance. Chance was recovering slowly. He still limped, still flinched at sudden sounds, but every day, he got a little stronger. Every time he saw Keanu walk toward him, Chance wagged his tail weak, but willing. Keanu would sit beside him, sometimes in silence, sometimes whispering stories no one else could hear. Meanwhile, across town, Vin and his biker crew were unraveling. Their bikes were still missing, but that wasn't what scared them anymore. Someone had posted footage of the dog kicking online. A bystander had caught the whole thing on a shaky phone camera. It showed Vin clearly, laughing after the kick, and it had spread like wildfire. Sponsors dropped their motorcycle club from events. A local TV channel canceled their feature. People crossed the street to avoid them, and worst of all, their own biker community, the people they once rode with, were turning on them. "You're making us look like monsters," one rider yelled at Vin. "We rescue dogs too." "Man," another growled. "You think this is a joke?" Vin tried to brush it off, but inside, panic was growing. He needed to fix it, not because he cared about the dog, but because he hated losing. On the fourth morning after the attack, Vin pulled into the parking lot of George's ranch in a borrowed truck. His face was pale. The other bikers weren't with him. He walked up to the fence, where Keanu and the Rock stood beside George. Vin cleared his throat. "Look, I didn't mean for it to go like that," he said. Silence. Double quotes. "Can I just get my bike and go?" The Rock stepped forward, not angry, just steady. "We're not holding your bike hostage," he said. "We're holding you accountable." Vin's face twisted. "What, you want me to apologize on camera?" Keanu finally spoke. "No," he said softly. "We want you to feel what you did, not just say words." Vin scoffed. "This some Hollywood moral thing." "No," Keanu said. "This is real life, and in real life, cruelty has consequences." George walked forward and handed Vin a leash. Attached to the other end was an older dog, one eye missing, scar on his side. "His name is Major," George said. "He was beaten for 5 years before we found him." Vin blinked. "What am I supposed to do with him?" George didn't flinch. "Walk him, feed him, earn his trust." Vin looked down at the leash like it was burning his skin. "No way." "Then walk away," the Rock said calmly. "But your face is already out there. Your name too. This is your chance." Vin looked around. The cameras were gone now. The world had moved on to another headline. But the silence here was louder than any crowd. He took the leash. The days that followed were awkward, filled with long pauses and longer stares. Vin showed up each morning, grumbling, dragging his boots, trying not to make eye contact. Major didn't trust him. He didn't eat when Vin was near. He didn't walk unless George or Keanu was around. And when Vin reached out to pet him, Major growled. On the third day, Vin yelled, "Why won't the stupid dog just get over it?" Keanu stood behind him, quiet but firm. "Because healing takes time," he said. "Because pain doesn't listen to your schedule." Vin turned, anger rising in his face. "You think you're better than me?" Keanu shook his head. "No. I think you forgot what being human means." Later that night, Vin sat alone near the kennel, watching the stars above the quiet field. He was tired, not from walking, but from pretending. He hadn't told anyone, but he used to have a dog, named Tank. A pit bull. He'd rescued it from a gas station when he was just 19. They were inseparable, until one night, someone hit Tank with their car and drove off. Vin never cried about it. He just shoved it all down, buried it under layers of fake toughness. But now Major's eyes stared back at him like they knew, like they saw everything he'd locked away. Vin whispered, "I'm sorry," and something shifted. Major didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just sat down beside him. Not close, but not far. It was a beginning. Meanwhile, Chance the injured pup took his first full walk across the yard. He limped, but his tail wagged the entire time. Volunteers clapped softly. Keanu knelt beside him and smiled. "You're a fighter," he whispered. George looked on with a quiet pride. "He's not the only one." The next morning, Vin showed up before sunrise. He brought dog food. He brought bandages. And he brought an old photo. Of him and Tank. He handed it to George. "I never told anyone about him," Vin said. "But maybe I forgot who I was." George nodded. "Then remember now." Vin looked around the ranch, the dogs, the volunteers, even Chance, who barked gently from across the yard. "Can I help for real?" Vin asked. Keanu smiled. "You just did." But none of them knew that a bigger storm was coming, because someone had been watching from the trees the night before. Someone who didn't like that Vin was changing, and who planned to drag everyone back into the dirt. Someone in the shadows. The wind was softer that morning. Sunlight filtered through tall oak trees around George's ranch, warming the earth below. Birds chirped above the barn, volunteers bustled around the yard, and the dogs barked with energy that hadn't been heard in months. Change was in the air, gentle, healing, hopeful. But not far from the fence line. Behind a curtain of brush and dry leaves, someone crouched low, watching. His name was Trent. He had been part of Vin's biker crew once, the one who stood in the background, who laughed at cruel jokes, but never made any himself. Now, his silence was hiding something darker. Trent never forgave Vin for becoming the good guy. To Trent, this ranch had made Vin weak, and he had a plan to prove it. Inside the ranch, Vin was cleaning out kennels, sweat dripping from his brow. Major followed behind him slowly, now trusting enough to stay close. Every once in a while, the dog nudged Vin's leg softly. It was their quiet language now. Keanu passed by, carrying 2 bags of dog food. Vin looked up and asked, "You need help?" Keanu smiled. "Only if you're not too famous to carry kibble." Vin laughed, the first genuine laugh in weeks. He hadn't felt like this in years. Useful, clean, real. George stood near the barn, arms crossed, watching the 2 men talk. He turned to the rock. "He's starting to come back." The rock nodded. "But something doesn't feel right. You feel it too?" George didn't answer. His eyes had already drifted toward the trees. That night, long after the last volunteer had gone home, the ranch lights dimmed. George locked the front gate. Keanu packed up some paperwork, and the rock stayed behind to repair one of the fences on the east side. Vin had offered to sleep in the barn, just in case any of the dogs woke up scared. He rolled out a thin mat, covered himself with an old blanket, and placed his jacket under his head. Major lay next to him. The stars above the broken rooftop beamed down quietly. But then, just after midnight, something moved. A figure crept along the rear fence. Slow, quiet, deliberate. Trent had waited until everyone was asleep. He wore dark clothes, gloves, and he carried a long piece of metal wire wrapped tightly in his fist. He wasn't here to steal. He was here to send a message inside the barn. Major lifted his head first. His ears twitched. He sniffed the air. Vin stirred beside him. Then came the sound. Metal scraping against a chain-link fence. Major stood up and growled. Vin sat up fast, his instincts flaring. He grabbed a flashlight and slipped out the side door. The Rock was already outside, crouched behind a water trough, scanning the shadows. Keanu appeared a second later from the back porch, holding a phone in one hand, already dialing. George didn't need a phone. He walked straight into the dark with nothing but his cane. "He's over there," George said, pointing toward the rear gate. Vin took off running. Major right behind him. And in the trees. Trent cursed under his breath. He tried to slip away, but Major barked loud and fast, an alert that echoed across the entire property. Keanu and the Rock sprinted toward the sound. Vin reached the back gate just as Trent turned to run. "You!" Vin shouted. Trent turned around and sneered. "Look at you, cleaning up dog crap and crying over puppies. You're a joke, man." Vin stepped forward, fists clenched. "You came here to hurt animals." Trent laughed. "No, I came here to hurt you." Before Vin could move, Trent lunged, but he never reached him. The Rock's arms grabbed Trent midair and slammed him to the ground with calm, terrifying control. Keanu stepped in fast and took Trent's wire away. "You had a choice," Keanu said softly. "You chose wrong." Trent struggled under the Rock's grip. "This ain't over." But his voice cracked. The rage in his eyes looked more like fear now. Vin knelt beside him. "You don't get to talk about strength anymore. You don't even know what it means." Trent's eyes darted around, but no one helped him. Major stood protectively in front of Vin. And behind them, the porch lights clicked on, revealing George with 2 police officers at his side. Trent didn't resist. When they cuffed him, he didn't shout. He just looked at Vin one last time and said, "You think they'll forget what you were?" Vin didn't answer, because the answer didn't matter anymore. The next morning, word spread across the ranch. What Trent tried to do. How Major alerted everyone. How Vin had protected the animals instead of running away. And something changed in the way the dogs looked at him. Like they finally believed he belonged here. Volunteers clapped when Vin walked into the yard. A little boy ran up and gave him a handmade card. It was drawn with crayons, showing Vin standing next to a happy dog. "This is you," the boy said. "You're a dog hero now." Vin felt tears forming, but he blinked them away quickly. "Thanks, kid." Later that afternoon, Vin sat with George under the same tree where they first talked. "I never thought I'd be part of anything good," Vin said quietly. "People aren't born good or bad." George replied, "They just get lost." Sometimes, Vin looked toward Chance, who now played gently with other dogs across the yard. "You think he'll ever forget what happened?" George shook his head. "No, but he'll grow from it. Same as you." Vin smiled, but George's face grew serious. "You ready for what comes next?" Vin looked confused. "What do you mean?" "There's still more," George said. "Still people out there who think hurting animals is a joke." Vin nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we showed them it's not funny anymore." Keanu walked up and handed Vin a stack of flyers. "We're starting something new," he said. "An outreach program, training bikers and others like you to become protectors instead of destroyers." Vin looked down at the paper. The top line read, "Ride for rescue. Protect the voiceless." His hands shook. This time not from fear. But from purpose. But far away, in a room filled with screens and blinking lights, someone else watched the news clip of Vin and the Rock at the ranch. A man in a leather chair leaned forward, tapping the screen. "Get me everyone we've got on this place," he said coldly. "If these people wanted to play heroes." He paused and smirked. "Then let's see how they handle real villains." Wolves at the Gateeth sky over the ranch turned gray by morning, like it sensed the storm quietly gathering. The dogs were restless. Birds stayed low. Even the wind felt colder. George stood near the porch, sipping his tea, eyes locked on the hills beyond the fence. He had been feeling it for days. Something was coming, but no one else knew yet. Inside the barn, Keanu was reviewing new security footage. Since the Trent incident, They'd installed cameras across the property. The Rock was reinforcing the outer fence with newer steel posts. Volunteers moved quietly, focused but nervous. The piece they had built felt fragile now. Vin walked over, sweat on his neck, hands stained with paint. "We've finished the new kennels," he said. "The kids from town even helped." Keanu smiled. "You're good with them." Vin shrugged. "They trust me now. That scares me more than the dogs did." Keanu nodded slowly. Trust is a heavy gift. That evening, George gathered everyone in the barn for a short meeting. The dogs sat near their handlers. Some volunteers leaned against hay bales. The energy in the air was tight, like a string pulled too hard. George cleared his throat. "Some of you might have noticed more unfamiliar cars parked on the highway. More people asking strange questions. Not all of them are friends." The room went quiet. George continued. "We think someone is watching us. We don't know who yet, but it's serious." Keanu stepped forward. "This ranch is not just a rescue anymore. It's a symbol, and some people don't like symbols." Vin looked confused. "But why? We're just saving dogs." The Rock spoke, voice like a calm storm. "Because cruelty doesn't like being exposed, and right now, you all are a mirror." George added, "So we double our shifts. We train smarter. And if anything strange happens, you report it. Don't be a hero. Be a team." The volunteers nodded. Some were scared. Some were ready. Vin clenched his jaw. "If someone comes for this place, they're gonna regret it." Keanu looked at him and said gently, "We protect. We don't retaliate." Vin paused. "What if they don't care?" George answered. "Then we teach them too." That night, the first real attack came. Just after midnight, a truck ran the rear gate. Sparks flew. The crash shook the ground. Inside the barn, the dogs howled. Keanu and the Rock sprinted into the dark, flashlights in hand. Vin was already grabbing a shovel. The volunteers shouted and scattered to safety. Two men wearing masks jumped from the truck. They threw smoke bombs, shouting, trying to scare the animals. But they didn't know this wasn't just a ranch anymore. This was a sanctuary. And no one was going to run. George stepped calmly from the house and blew a loud whistle. Instantly, the dogs stopped barking. They stood alert, ready, trained. Keanu dashed forward and tackled one of the masked men, knocking him into the dirt. The Rock caught the second and pinned him against the truck with one arm. Vin arrived moments later and grabbed the keys from the ignition. The smoke cleared. Police sirens wailed in the distance, and George stood in the center of the chaos like a mountain, unmoved. At the station, the men confessed quickly. They had been paid. Cash. No names, just instructions. Make the place look unsafe. Scare the dogs. Scare the people. Make it fail. George listened quietly. Then he asked, "Why?" The officers shook their heads. "Someone wants this place shut down." Keanu spoke softly, "And they don't care how." The next day, the media storm began. Headlines read, "Dog Sanctuary Under Attack. Keanu Reeves and the Rock protect animals from masked men. Who wants to destroy a place built on kindness?" The ranch's donations tripled in hours. People around the world sent letters, toys, blankets, even tiny handwritten notes from children. But with the light came more shadows. A letter arrived. No return address. Typed. Inside it read, "You should have stayed quiet." Vin crumpled the paper. "Cowards." Keanu looked at him. "They want you angry. Don't give them what they want." Vin growled, "They're threatening animals, man." The Rock put a firm hand on Vin's shoulder. "So we fight the right way." George made a choice that day. They were no longer going to be on defense. They were going to take this story to the world. He called every contact he had left from his military days, from old shelters, from rescue networks. Then they set up a live stream. Rescue. Live. 24/7's Guardians. Keanu stood in front of the camera. So did The Rock. And Vin. The message was simple. This ranch protects the forgotten, and we're not backing down. Millions watched, cried, shared. Vin told his story, not as a hero, but as someone trying to change. "I used to be one of them," he said. "Someone who thought dogs were just noise. Now I understand they're the best of us, and we don't leave the best behind." Tears filled the chat. People from Australia, Canada, India, Mexico sent messages of support. They had touched something deeper than just rescuing dogs. They were reminding the world how to care. But in a dark boardroom across the state, a powerful man watched the stream. With cold eyes, he owned a chain of illegal dog fighting rings. The rescue ranch had been rescuing dogs. He lost control of. It was bad for business. And now, it was personal. Shut them down, he ordered. How his assistant asked. He smiled, legally. Back at the ranch, a black car pulled up just before dusk. A woman in a sharp suit stepped out. She introduced herself to George with a fake smile. "You're being served," she said. "Zoning violations, health code violations, noise complaints." Vin stepped forward. "You're joking, right?" The woman handed over a thick stack of papers. "You have 10 days to appear in court. After that, this place is at risk of shutdown." Keanu looked at the paper. "This is manufactured." The woman didn't respond. She just walked back to her. Karen drove away. Vin looked at George. "What now?" George looked at the hills beyond the ranch, where the sun was starting to set. Then he turned back. "We fight. In court, in truth, in the light." And slowly, everyone nodded. Even the dogs stood quietly, as if they understood, because this wasn't just about animals anymore. This was about standing up for what mattered. No matter who tried to silence it. The courtroom. The sky over the courthouse was heavy with clouds. It hadn't rained in weeks, but today felt different. Something was building inside the courtroom. The air was thick, not with heat, but with tension. Rows of people had come to witness what they called the rescue trial. The media called it a war between kindness and cruelty. Keanu sat near the front, silent as ever, hands folded in his lap. The Rock leaned against the wall at the back of the room, arms crossed, scanning the faces of the opposition. George sat quietly in a suit that looked too formal for him, but he wore it for the dogs, for everyone they'd saved, and everyone still suffering. Vin paced nervously near the door. He wasn't sure if he was even allowed inside, but Keanu had insisted. "You earned your seat," he had said. The judge finally entered. Everyone rose, and the battle for the ranch began. The prosecution opened strong. A smooth-talking lawyer named Mur Calloway stood tall, adjusting his designer glasses. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is not about animals. It is about law. The law clearly states that any structure housing more than 15 dogs must be zoned as a facility. This ranch is not. It's been breaking that rule for over a year." He turned to the jury. "Laws are not emotional. They are clear. And if we bend them for feelings, then why have them at all?" George remained calm. He had heard worse, but deep down, he could see what was happening. They weren't trying to win with truth. They were trying to bury the ranch in rules. Their next witness was a city inspector. He claimed the barn wasn't up to code. He said there were too many animals. He even suggested the dogs could be a public risk. Vin nearly exploded from his chair, but the Rock placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Not now," he whispered. Keanu sat still, eyes never blinking. He had learned long ago, silence can be louder than anger. When it was time for the defense, George stood. His voice was soft but clear. "This ranch didn't begin with blueprints or lawyers. It began with a dog that had nowhere else to go." He paused, then pointed to the back. "He's here today. His name is Chance." Everyone turned. Chance was lying beside a young girl in a wheelchair. Her name was Lily. She had been paralyzed in an accident. Her parents had brought her to the ranch months ago. She hadn't smiled for weeks until Chance crawled into her lap. Lily raised a small hand. "He's my best friend," she said. Gasps moved through the courtroom like a wave. The judge cleared his throat, visibly shaken. "Continue, Mr. George." George nodded. "We didn't break the law. We filled a gap the law forgot. These dogs were abandoned, abused. Some were going to be killed. We saved them because no one else would. And now, you're saying we should have left them to die because of paperwork." He sat down. For a moment, the room was silent. Vin was called next. His hands shook slightly as he walked to the front. The lawyer on the other side looked amused. "Mr. Vin," he said, "would you say you are a reformed man?" "I'm still becoming one," Vin replied. "Interesting," the lawyer said. So you admit you once hurt animals? Vin's jaw tightened. Yes, and you now work at a dog rescue? Vin nodded. The lawyer leaned forward. How convenient. Vin stood straighter. I didn't come to fix my name. I came to fix what I broke. Some people kick animals and hide. I stayed. And I listened. Then he paused. You want the truth? I'm ashamed of who I was. But these dogs, they didn't just survive me. They changed me. The jury listened. In silence. Vin stepped down. Without waiting to be excused. Next was Keanu. He stood up, slow and calm. The courtroom seemed to lean toward him. Mr. Reeves, the prosecutor said, why are you involved in this case? Keanu looked around the room before answering. Because when I was young, I watched someone beat a dog to death. The air froze. I didn't know what to do. I was just a kid. I still remember the sound, the silence after. It haunted me for years. I told myself one day, if I ever saw that kind of pain again, I wouldn't walk away. He turned to the judge. So now I don't. He sat down. The judge had to remove his glasses and wipe his eyes. The prosecution tried again with more paperwork. Zoning maps, rules, numbers, but they felt smaller now. The courtroom had seen something more powerful than rules. They had seen truth. They had seen love. The final surprise came from a whistleblower, a former assistant to the man running the illegal dog fighting ring. She showed up unannounced, standing at the back of the courtroom, holding a folder. Your Honor, she said nervously, I used to work for him. The man funding this lawsuit. He wants to shut the ranch down because they've been saving the dogs he profits from. Gasps. She handed the judge a USB drive. Videos, records, locations. Proof. The judge called a recess immediately. The room buzzed with shock. Keanu walked up to the woman and thanked her quietly. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. I couldn't live with myself. Outside the courtroom, a crowd had gathered. Reporters, supporters, animal lovers. They clapped when the ranch team stepped outside. Vin stood frozen. For the first time, people weren't yelling at him. They were smiling. One woman handed him a note. He unfolded it. You are not who you were. Thank you. He didn't know her name, but he would remember that sentence forever. Back inside, the judge returned after reviewing the evidence. His voice was clear. This court finds that the rescue ranch has not only followed the spirit of the law but has reminded us all why laws exist in the first place: to protect, to guide, and to serve justice. The courtroom erupted. The ranch was safe for now, but the man behind the lawsuit was still free. And as George stood by the courthouse steps, the wind picked up again. He turned to Keanu and The Rock. The real fight's just begun, he said, and they nodded. Together. Because this was no longer just about one ranch. This was a movement, and the wolves were still out there. The real rescue begins. The wind was fierce across the open highway. Keanu Reeves rode ahead, helmet low, eyes forward. Beside him, The Rock gripped the handlebars of his bike like it was part of him. Vin rode just behind, leather jacket patched with a new symbol, a paw wrapped in a circle of flame. They weren't riding for fun. They were riding for war. A quiet war. Against chains, cages, and blood-covered arenas hidden in shadows. The ranch was safe, but the world was not. And today, they were heading into the darkness. To shine a light. The man behind everything had a name. Most people never heard it. But in back alleys and dark corners of the animal trade, he was called Crowder. He ran illegal dog fights across 3 states, smuggled abused animals, and paid men to shut down any rescues that stood in his way. He thought he was untouchable, until George, Keanu, The Rock, and Vin lit a match under his empire. Now, he was nervous and dangerous. George stayed back at the ranch. His knees couldn't handle field work anymore, but his mind was sharp. He coordinated through a laptop, headphones on, maps open, Zoom calls connected. Listen close. He told them, we got a tip. One of Crowder's biggest holding sites is in the desert, an old warehouse off Route 47. Tonight, there's a fight scheduled. Dogs are already locked in cages. Keanu's voice came through the headset. We're almost there. George took a deep breath. Get in, get the dogs, get out. No showboating. No speeches, Vin's voice added. Unless the guy begs for one. George chuckled softly. Just don't get caught. They reached the warehouse just as the sun began to sink behind the dunes. It looked abandoned from the outside. But inside, voices echoed. Men yelled. Money changed hands. Cages rattled. Dogs whimpered. Keanu slipped through a side entrance. The Rock took the rear. Vin climbed the rusted stairs to the upper deck. They moved like shadows. Inside the main room, a crowd of men circled a dirt pit. In it, two scarred dogs circled each other, too tired to even fight. A man in a suit shouted, "Next round 20,000. The crowd roared. And then a door slammed open. All heads turned. Keanu stood there. Still. Calm. And terrifying. Someone whispered, "Is that?" Before they could finish, the Rock entered behind him. He didn't say a word. He just stared. And behind them, Vin walked in holding a chain cutter in one hand. "This fight's over," Vin said. A few men lunged forward. Bad choice. In seconds, the Rock grabbed one, tossed him across a table. Keanu disarmed another before he even finished blinking. Vin ran to the cages. "You're free," he whispered, unlocking them one by one. Dogs burst out, weak but breathing. Some ran. Some stayed close. Then came the noise no one expected. Sirens. George had called the police 20 minutes before they arrived. He timed it perfectly. Flashing lights surrounded the building. Officers poured in. Men dropped their weapons. Some tried to run but tripped over cages. Crowder stepped from the shadows, face twisted in rage. He looked at Keanu. "You ruined everything." Keanu stared back. Double quotes. "No, you did." Then turned away. "Because some men don't deserve the last word." Back at the ranch, the cages were filled with new dogs. Some had scars. Some had numbers burned into their skin. All had pain. But now, they had peace. Vin stayed up all night beside one cage. A black and white dog with cloudy eyes wouldn't sleep unless Vin hummed. So he hummed. Keanu walked quietly past the rows, placing small notes near each crate. "You're safe now. You are loved. No one will hurt you again." The Rock carried bags of food into the barn, joking with volunteers, hiding how sore his arms were. And George stood by the gate, watching the stars rise. "They did it," he whispered. But he wasn't just talking about the rescue. He was talking about healing and redemption. And the kind of justice that doesn't need violence to be powerful. Weeks passed. The ranch was renamed The Haven. A second location opened in Arizona. Another in Nevada. And the symbol paw wrapped in fire became a movement. Bikers started riding with it on their jackets. Not to look cool. But to protect. Everywhere they went, they carried leashes, treats, and stories. Stories of change. Of men who became better. Of dogs who refused to give up. And of one moment, one cruel kick that started it all. One morning, George gathered the team under the big oak tree. Chance lay at his feet. Major rested nearby. George looked around and said, "I thought I'd seen everything in life. War, loss, pain. But you showed me something I didn't believe existed anymore." Vin wiped his nose. "What's that?" George smiled. "Hope." Keanu looked at the sky. The Rock placed a hand on George's shoulder. Vin sat down beside Chance. And together, they watched the sunrise. Not as heroes. Not as celebrities, but as humans. Who chose kindness and never looked back.